For most people, boarding a plane is routine, but for Amara, this moment meant everything. With her 7-year-old daughter Zuri holding her hand tightly, she stepped into the economy cabin, eyes full of a quiet mix of worry and wonder. Zuri looked up through the window of the terminal, eyes sparkling. Zuri, Mommy, does the plane fly higher than the clouds? Amara smiled and gently brushed a curl from her daughter's cheek. Higher than any dream I had when I was your age. What she didn't say was that it had taken 3 jobs over 3 months just to afford these 2 seats. She didn't mention that this trip wasn't for fun, but to visit her father, who lay in a hospital in Los Angeles, fighting to breathe. Zuri clutched her small backpack as they walked down the aisle, careful not to bump into anyone. Amara moved quietly, apologizing gently when she needed to pass. She didn't want to disturb anyone. She never did. They reached row 34, seats B and C, 2 middle seats, squeezed between strangers. They sat down quietly. A tall, blonde flight attendant, Rebecca, walked past. Her eyes slid over Amara and Zuri without stopping. No smile, no nod, just nothing. Her colleague Susan glanced their way too briefly, and then looked ahead with a blank expression. Zuri giggled as she played with her seatbelt. That small laugh seemed to make Susan uncomfortable. Zuri looked around, full of curiosity. Zuri, Mommy, is this the fast fly button? And is that the loud alarm? Amara chuckled softly. No, sweetheart, that's the button to call the flight attendant, but we only press it when we really need help, okay? She taught her daughter to be polite, respectful, even to those who might not return it. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Zuri's hand squeezed Amara's tightly. Her little eyes were wide, not sure if she should be scared or excited. Amara leaned over and kissed her forehead. Amara, it's okay, baby. We're just flying a little closer to Grandpa today. Their journey began with hope, but beyond the clouds waited a storm they never expected, a storm called prejudice. The seatbelt signs were still on. Zuri shifted in her seat, fidgeting with the little tray in front of her. Amara placed a gentle hand over hers. Amara, sit still for a little bit, honey. We'll be in the air soon. A few minutes later, the beverage cart rolled down the aisle. Rebecca smiled and made polite conversation with the man in 34A, a white businessman in a blazer. She asked if he wanted sparkling water or orange juice. She even laughed at his joke, though it wasn't that funny. When she reached Amara and Zuri, the warmth vanished. Her tone was flat, mechanical. What would you like to drink? Just a water, please. And may I have one for my daughter, too? Rebecca handed her 1 cup without a word. Could I have another for her? She's not feeling well. Only 1 per passenger. That's the policy. She moved on before Amara could say anything else. Zuri looked up, confused. But she gave that man 2 drinks. Amara leaned in and whispered, Sometimes people just treat others differently, sweetie. It's not your fault. Across the aisle, Susan was collecting trash with a slight scowl on her face. When Zuri accidentally dropped her napkin, Susan didn't bend down. She just stared at Amara, waiting for her to pick it up. Amara did, silently. Around them, the other passengers continued their meals, their movies, their conversations. No one seemed to notice what was happening, or maybe they noticed and chose to look away. Emily, the young flight attendant in the back, watched the exchange. Her hands fidgeted at her sides. Her face looked unsure. This wasn't the first time she'd seen Rebecca act like this, but today felt different. It felt heavier. She saw how Amara gently rubbed Zuri's back when she started coughing again. She saw how Amara bit her lip, trying not to show her discomfort. And still, Rebecca and Susan treated them as if they were just an inconvenience. Emily stepped forward, almost reflexively, then stopped. Rebecca shot her a look from down the aisle. It was subtle, but clear. Not your place. Stay out of it. Emily backed away slowly, returning to the galley. Her heart was beating a little faster. She'd promised herself that if she ever saw something wrong, she'd speak up. But here she was, doing nothing. And Amara was already used to it. Zuri had grown quiet. Her head rested against Amara's arm, and her body felt warm. Are you okay, baby? Zuri, my tummy hurts. Her voice was soft, faint. Amara reached into her bag, pulled out a damp cloth, and pressed it to Zuri's forehead. She glanced at the seat map in the in-flight magazine. Their current seats were crowded. No armrest space, no window, just a wall of legs and elbows. Across the aisle, an empty seat by the window remained open. A man had moved closer to his wife 2 rows ahead, leaving it unoccupied. Amara raised her hand politely. Rebecca appeared, her arms crossed. "Excuse me, I was wondering, my daughter isn't feeling well. Is it possible to move to that empty seat just by the window? It might help her feel better." Rebecca looked over at the seat, then back at Amara. "Those are assigned seats. We don't move people around just for comfort." "It's not for comfort. She's sick. She could use the space to lie against the wall. We can't make exceptions." Her voice was louder now, enough for people nearby to turn and look. Susan came over, sensing the tension. "Is there a problem here?" "She wants to move seats. Says her kid doesn't feel well." Susan didn't look at Amara when she answered. "Well, we don't rearrange seating mid-flight unless it's a medical emergency." Amara opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at Zuri, who was curled up, eyes barely open. "Amara, thank you anyway." Rebecca and Susan turned and walked away. Zuri whispered, "Why did she sound mad at you?" Amara didn't answer right away. She gently smoothed her daughter's hair, whispering, "Some people don't know how to care, sweetheart, but we do." In the back of the plane, Emily stood behind the curtain, having heard everything. She gripped the edge of the wall, her jaw tense. She knew this wasn't about policy. She'd seen seats moved for passengers before. Friendly, smiling passengers. Passengers who looked different. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since her training began, she felt ashamed of the uniform on her shoulders. Emily stood behind the galley curtain, hands still gripping the counter. She was the newest flight attendant on this route. Fresh out of training, still memorizing procedures, still learning how to smile even when passengers weren't smiling back. But today, what bothered her wasn't a rude customer, it was her colleagues. She peeked down the aisle, watching Amara gently rock her daughter, wiping her forehead with a cloth that had clearly been reused too many times. Zuri looked worse now. Her skin had a dull sheen, her head drooped to one side. Amara looked calm on the outside, but Emily could see it, the quiet fear in her eyes. Rebecca and Susan walked past again, ignoring the row completely. Emily had seen Susan move an elderly white couple just last week when they didn't like the smell of the food in their row. No medical emergency, no protest, just a smile and, "Let me see what I can do." But today, with a sick child, silence. Emily remembered something her mother once told her. Sometimes silence isn't neutral, it's a choice. She had been 10 years old, standing in a store beside her mom when a security guard had followed them through every aisle. Her mom had said nothing until they got home. It's not just what they say, it's what they won't do for you. Now here Emily stood, years later, watching that same silence repeat itself. She took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the curtain. She walked slowly down the aisle and stopped beside row 34. "Emily, hi there. Is everything okay?" Amara looked up, surprised. Her voice was low, careful. "My daughter's not feeling well. I asked if we could move to that open seat just so she could lean against the wall. But it wasn't allowed." Emily looked across the aisle. The seat was still empty. She looked down at Zuri, flushed cheeks, dry lips, the way she was breathing slightly through her mouth. "Would it help if she had a bit more space?" Amara hesitated. "It really would. I don't want to make trouble." Emily knelt slightly beside the seat. "You're not making trouble. You're being a mom." She stood up. "I'll talk to someone." As she turned, she saw Rebecca watching from up the aisle, arms crossed, eyes cold. Emily paused for just a moment, then kept walking. She didn't know what the consequences would be, but in that moment something in her shifted. She was no longer watching, she was choosing. Emily stood at the front of the galley, heart pounding. She had just asked the lead flight attendant, Rebecca, again, "Emily, there's an open seat. The child is clearly not well. Can we just—" We already told her no. If you go around undermining your seniors, you won't last long here. This isn't about rank, it's about a sick kid. Rebecca stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "We follow procedure. If you want to play hero, do it somewhere else." Emily stood still. Her fists were clenched at her sides. She didn't say anything. Not yet. Back in row 34, Amara tried to distract Zuri with quiet songs and little drawings on the back of the safety card. but Zuri's head hung lower now. Her skin was pale and her body trembled slightly with each breath. Amara pressed the call button. 1 minute passed, then 2. No one came. She pressed it again. Still nothing. The passenger across the aisle, an older man in a business suit, glanced at the button lighting up, then looked away. Finally, Susan approached, slowly. "You called?" Amara, gentle but firm. "My daughter is getting worse. She's burning up. Please, can I get some water or ice, something to cool her down? We'll be coming through with refreshments shortly." She turned and left. "No, I'll check. No, let me help." Just dismissal. Amara sat back, blinking hard. She wasn't going to cry. Not here, not now. But Zuri stirred and moaned softly. That was enough. She stood up and reached into the overhead bin for her tote bag. It bumped slightly against the edge of the compartment, causing a small thud. Rebecca turned around from the galley and called out loudly, "Rebecca, ma'am, you need to remain seated. The seatbelt sign is still on." Amara froze. "I'm just trying to get something for my daughter. She's sick. You've been difficult this whole flight. Please sit down before we report this as a disruption." A few people turned to look, a few murmurs, a few lifted eyebrows. But still, no one spoke up. Emily stepped forward again, standing halfway down the aisle. She looked at Amara, then at Rebecca, and she made a choice. She walked all the way to row 34, knelt beside Zuri, and gently touched her forehead. Then she looked up at Amara. "Emily, she has a fever. This isn't something we should ignore." She looked at Rebecca, who was watching, fuming, but Emily didn't move. That moment, small and quiet, changed everything. Because it only takes one person to break the silence. Emily stayed crouched beside Zuri for a few seconds longer. The little girl's skin was flushed, her breathing shallow. She whimpered, and Amara stroked her back, whispering something only a mother would say. Emily stood up slowly and turned toward the front of the plane. "Emily," calm but clear, "I'm requesting ice, water, and a cold cloth for this child. She has a fever and may be dehydrated." Rebecca stood stiffly, arms crossed. "You're out of line, Emily." "Then write me up, but I won't ignore a sick child." Rebecca didn't respond, just turned and walked briskly toward the front. Susan followed, but not before throwing a cold glance at Amara. Emily went to the galley, filled a cup with ice, soaked a clean napkin, and returned to row 34. Amara looked at her, eyes wide, unsure whether to say thank you or brace for more. Emily, softly, "I'm sorry. I should have helped sooner." She gently placed the cloth on Zuri's forehead. The girl flinched at first, but then let out a shaky breath. Her body relaxed slightly. Around them, the cabin was silent. People had been watching. A few passengers whispered. Some looked away, but others started to shift in their seats. One woman in row 35 leaned forward. "Woman, I saw what happened. You asked politely. They just didn't want to help." A man nearby nodded. "Man, I've seen people moved for much less." A ripple began to form in the quiet air. A passenger near the window pulled out his phone. He hadn't planned to say anything. But now, he hit record. Back at the front, Rebecca and Susan were speaking to the captain through the intercom. Their faces were tight, voices low. They didn't know it yet. But the moment they refused help, the moment they ignored that call button, they had lit a fire they couldn't put out. Emily sat beside Zuri now, monitoring her. She wasn't a doctor, but she was human. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Amara looked at her, eyes full of gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but that's why I did." It always starts with one person who doesn't stay silent, one voice that doesn't look away, and once that voice speaks, others start to rise. The plane was still in the air, but the story was already beginning to spread. A young man seated 2 rows behind Amara had been filming quietly ever since he noticed something felt off. He hadn't planned to get involved. He wasn't one to cause trouble. But the moment Rebecca raised her voice at a mother trying to comfort her sick child, something clicked. His thumb pressed record. He didn't film everything, just the parts that mattered. Rebecca's dismissive tone, Susan's cold stare, and Emily, kneeling, helping, showing the care no one else would. The video was 58 seconds long. He uploaded it to his Instagram story with the caption, "When kindness is a choice, and they chose not to." Then he shared it to his public feed, then to TikTok, and then the internet did what it does best. By the time the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, The video had already gained over 3,000 views. By landing, it was at 15,000, with #Flight 34B trending quietly. Strangers on the ground began reposting. One tweet read, "A mother begs for help on a plane, gets treated like a threat, but one flight attendant had courage, watch this." Another said, "The look on the child's face broke me. This is why people don't trust systems." Some viewers assumed it was international. Some guessed it happened years ago. But within hours, someone matched the flight number, the uniforms, the route. It was happening right now, and that made it different. Inside the cabin, Amara didn't know. She sat with Zuri leaning on her lap, her arm gently resting on the child's shoulders. Zuri had fallen asleep, finally, her breathing more even. Her skin still felt warm, but not burning. Emily checked in again. "Emily, she's okay?" Amara, "Still tired, but better, thanks to you." Emily hesitated. "You might want to prepare for some attention once we land." A few passengers noticed what happened. One of them was filming. Amara blinked. "Amara, filming? Us?" "Emily, I think to help, not to harm." Amara looked down, unsure how to feel. She hadn't asked for anyone to record her. She hadn't expected to be anyone's story. But deep down, she also knew silence never fixed anything. Back in the galley, Rebecca was checking final descent procedures. She hadn't seen the video, but she had noticed the looks. Passengers weren't smiling at her anymore. Some were whispering. Susan was quieter too. The confident edge in her voice had dulled. They had done what they always did, maintain order, enforce rules. But for the first time they sensed something they didn't expect: accountability. As the wheels touched down in Los Angeles, phones lit up across the plane. Wi-Fi reconnected. Notifications buzzed. And then, someone gasped. The young man who posted the video held his phone up for the woman next to him. "Passenger, this is your flight, right? Look, it's everywhere." Outside on the ground, a local reporter had seen the video an hour earlier. He was already waiting near the gate with a small camera crew just in case. Inside the terminal, a few passengers began talking, and talking turned into posting. Posting turned into tagging. By the time Amara stepped out into the gate area with Zuri sleeping against her shoulder, 3 different reporters had already tweeted, "We are trying to identify the mother in the video from Flight 34B. If you know her, please help us connect. Protect Black mothers." Emily walked beside them, unsure whether to say goodbye or walk away quietly. Amara turned to her. "Amara, you did what you could. That's more than most. I wish it hadn't happened at all." "Me too, but maybe it had to, so someone else wouldn't have to go through it." And then Zuri stirred and whispered without opening her eyes, "Zuri, are we home?" Amara smiled gently. "Not yet, baby, but we're getting there." By the time Amara reached baggage claim, the video had hit over 100,000 views. She hadn't checked her phone. She hadn't opened social media. But she felt it, something in the air. The way people glanced at her, the way strangers gave her space or looked a little too long. She spotted the carousel, then paused. Zuri, half asleep in her arms, murmured softly, "Zuri, are we really here now, Mommy?" "Yes, baby, we're here." But even here, something followed them. A quiet wave of eyes, whispers, phones lifted for a second, then lowered quickly. Emily caught up behind her. "Emily, do you need help with your bag?" Amara hesitated. Part of her wanted to disappear. The other part, the tired, burned-out, endlessly polite part, nodded. "Amara, thank you." Emily pulled the suitcase down from the carousel and rolled it beside her. Before either of them could say more, a woman in a blazer stepped toward them. "Reporter, hi. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm with Channel 6. Are you the passenger from Flight 34B? Amara looked at her for a long second. She could deny it, walk away, pretend she didn't know. But what would that change? "Amara, I am." The reporter's tone softened immediately. "Reporter, your stories touched a lot of people. Would you be open to sharing more when you're ready?" Amara glanced down at Zuri, still curled against her. She wasn't ready for a camera. She wasn't ready for headlines. But then she thought of every woman who had been dismissed, every mother told she was difficult, every child overheated in silence because no one wanted to listen. "Amara, not today, but maybe soon." The reporter nodded. "Reporter, we'll be here when you are." Later that evening, while Zuri napped on a hotel bed and Amara scrolled through her messages, she saw the video for the first time. She watched herself, hunched beside her child, trying to speak politely as Rebecca stood stone-faced above her. She watched as Emily kneeled. As someone whispered, "Why aren't they helping her?" She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. But when the video ended, she whispered to herself, "They saw it." Not just what happened, but what it meant. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, the storm had fully arrived. The video had made it to national news. Celebrities had reposted it. A congresswoman had quote-tweeted it with, "No mother should be treated like this at 30,000 feet, or anywhere." The airline's public relations team scrambled. Within hours, a statement was posted. "We are aware of a disturbing incident on Flight 34B. We are conducting a full investigation and have placed the crew members involved on temporary leave. We are committed to fair and respectful treatment of all passengers, without exception." But the damage was already done. Hashtags trended: "Protect Black families," "Justice for Zuri," "Thank you, Emily." And underneath them, more stories emerged. Passengers from other flights, employees, people who had stayed silent for years, now finding their voice. Emily sat in her apartment that night, scrolling through comments. Some called her a hero. Others asked why she was the only one. She didn't feel heroic. She felt conflicted, exhausted, but proud. She called her mother. "Emily, Mom, I think I did something good today, but I also broke a rule. Maybe more than one." Her mother laughed gently on the other end. Emily's mom. "Rules don't raise people, kindness does." Susan, meanwhile, had gone private on all social media. Rebecca had turned off comments. They weren't speaking to anyone, not even to each other. The company had asked them not to discuss the incident until the investigation is complete. But for the first time, they weren't in control of the narrative. The world had seen, and the truth, once out, wasn't going back in. That night, Amara opened her inbox. There were hundreds of messages, some offering support, others sharing similar stories. But one stood out. It was from a civil rights attorney based in LA. It read, "You are not alone. You have rights. If you're ready to speak, we'll help make sure you're heard." She stared at the message. Then she looked at Zuri, sleeping peacefully at last. She clicked reply. By morning, the video had reached over 2 million views. News outlets replayed it on every screen, from local stations in LA to national networks. Phrases like systemic bias, emotional neglect, and racial profiling in the sky were suddenly on everyone's lips. But what made this different wasn't just the outrage, it was the echo. People weren't just watching, they were responding. They were sharing their own stories. A young mother in Atlanta tweeted, "In 2019, I was told my toddler was too loud on a flight. They skipped our row for snacks. I stayed quiet, never again." A black nurse in Detroit posted a video of herself in uniform. "I fly home every other month. I've been mistaken for staff more times than I can count. Maybe now people will listen." A white woman in Chicago wrote, "I was on Flight 34B. I saw it. I said nothing. I regret that deeply. Silence was easier, but it shouldn't have been." Each story added weight. What started as one moment on one flight became something bigger. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Travel bloggers and aviation insiders posted breakdowns of the incident. One retired flight attendant wrote a full thread explaining how racial bias in service was a long-known, little-addressed issue within the industry. The pressure grew. The airline, already under fire, was forced to act faster than it wanted. Within 48 hours, an internal memo leaked. "This incident reveals failures in our crew culture and customer service practices. We will launch an independent review and mandatory anti-bias training." Rebecca, last name redacted, and Susan hinted remained suspended during investigation. The memo ended with a line that felt more like fear than accountability. "We must protect the brand." Amara, meanwhile, wasn't interested in brand damage. She was thinking about dignity. She had taken a call that morning with the civil rights attorney. They had spoken for over an hour. She'd recounted every moment of the flight, each word, each denial, each refusal to help. When the lawyer asked if she wanted to file a public complaint or remain private, Amara answered calmly, "I want to do both. I want them to know my name, but I also want my daughter to know hers." The lawyer smiled. "Then we'll make sure both of your voices are protected and heard." Emily received a letter from HR requesting an internal interview. She knew it was coming. She also received something else. A handwritten note, slipped under her apartment door. You reminded us what real service means. You reminded me why I started this job 27 years ago. Thank you. Linda, gate supervisor, LAX. She cried reading it. She hadn't realized how heavy the silence had been, until someone broke it with kindness. By the third day, a march had been organized outside the airline's headquarters. Hundreds showed up. Signs read, "Black mothers deserve better. Justice at 30,000 feet. We are all row 34B. Amara didn't attend, not because she didn't care, but because Zuri had finally slept through the night. Instead, she sent a message to be read aloud at the rally. The lawyer printed it on a card, walked to the mic, and read, "My name is Amara J. Daniels. I am not a symbol. I am not a hashtag. I am a mother, and all I asked for was water, space, and care." This story went viral, but it wasn't rare. For every mother who was ignored, shamed, or silenced, I see you. And I believe that now, more of the world does too. The crowd applauded, and far away in her hotel room, Amara held Zuri close and whispered, "They're listening now." One voice, then two, then hundreds, then millions. This wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about the skies we all share, and the people some still pretend not to see. 2 weeks had passed. The story of Flight 34B was no longer breaking news, but it hadn't been forgotten. Think pieces still floated across news sites. Talk shows debated airline policy, bias, and whether grace under pressure should mean silence in the face of injustice. But for Amara, the media storm had quieted, and in that quiet, healing began. Zuri had bounced back, slowly at first, then all at once. She was laughing again, drawing again. One day, she handed Amara a picture she had colored. It was a plane in the sky. 2 people were standing near the window seats. One was a tall woman with curly hair. The other had short blonde hair and a name tag that said, Emily. Zuri had written in shaky letters, "We flew high, and we came back." Amara stood in front of her apartment mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse. Today she wasn't flying, she was speaking. She'd been invited to a panel on equity in travel. It wasn't something she'd ever imagined doing. But when she stepped onto that stage, her posture steady, voice calm, she didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every mother who'd swallowed her anger, for every passenger who'd been dismissed, for every child whose pain had been overlooked. Her story no longer belonged to the airline. It belonged to her. Emily, too, had changed. After her formal interview, the airline issued her a written commendation. But more importantly, they offered her a choice, a new role, leading equity and ethics training for incoming flight crews. She accepted. At her first session, she stood in front of a room full of young attendants in crisp uniforms, unsure eyes, and bright hopes. She looked at them and said, "You may be told to follow every rule, but if following a rule means ignoring someone in need, you're allowed to pause, to question, to care." They listened, and maybe because of her, some would remember. Susan quietly resigned. No public statement, no apology. Rebecca, placed on extended leave, was still under review. For some, consequences came in headlines, for others, in silence. But change doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to last. One afternoon, Amara received an envelope. No name, just a logo, an airline. Inside was a letter. "Dear Miss Daniels, we failed you. We failed your daughter. This letter is not an excuse, it's a recognition that policy without compassion is not protection. We are rebuilding, not just our procedures, but our culture. You helped start that. We are truly sorry." Folded behind the letter was a lifetime voucher, but Amara didn't smile. She didn't need free flights. She needed something else, respect. And now, finally, she had it. Weeks later, Amara and Zuri stood in line at the airport again. Same backpacks, same curls, same warm, nervous energy. But this time, something felt different. When they approached the gate, the attendant smiled kindly. "Attendant, welcome aboard, Miss Daniels." And Zuri. Zuri beamed. "They know my name." Amara smiled. "They should." They walked down the jet bridge, hand in hand. Zuri looked up. "Do you think this time we'll fly above the clouds again?" "No, baby. This time, we rise above more than that." Not all journeys are measured in miles. Some are measured in courage, in truth, in voices that refuse to stay quiet. And sometimes, just sometimes, a storm leads to a clearer sky. The end.